Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the Stewards Room, where we'll be taking a look at racing incidents submitted by you guys and trying to make a determination on who, if anyone, was at fault. There's a link in the description to submit your own clips, and feel free to check out the playlist link for more of these videos, specifically the first, which acts as a scene setter. Also keep an eye out for cards popping up on screen towards the end of each segment, where you can vote on who you thought was at fault for each incident. So our first clip is from the 2019 Bahrain Grand Prix, and we're looking at Carlos Sainz going for an overtake on Max Verstappen with the DRS here early on in the race. And at this point it becomes essentially an inside overtake for Verstappen because Sainz has already got ahead at that point. But so Verstappen goes for the inside to try and keep the position that he lost. And they have a little bit of a coming together, as you can see there. Bash wheels, and in any other racing series that wouldn't really be an issue, but as we go further on, that was enough with these fragile cars to give Sainz an issue, give him a puncture, and yeah, that's obviously just a cause of the fact that these cars are so fragile, and if you hit them in slightly the wrong way, then you're going to have issues. But to say this was touring cars or something like that, that would be a perfectly fine overtake. But we do have it from a different angle here as well. So as you can see, he's going up at this point, with the way that it is now, Sainz has used the DRS to get up on the outside, and he's fully ahead at this point. So at this point it becomes instead of being an outside overtake for Sainz, because he's ahead, this becomes an inside overtake for Verstappen. So that's the bit of the rules that we're going to look at in a second. But obviously, just looking at it from this perspective, Verstappen does go up the inside here, and essentially you could say gets a little bit squeezed into the curb, and it's actually the hit on the curb that sends him into Sainz. It's not that he just runs into him of his own accord. You can see that if we, I'll pause it just before it happens. So we're coming in here, you can see that Sainz is squeezing this way, and the space is diminishing. You know, you're not going to fit a car there, so he's having to go over the curb, and it's hitting this curb here is what causes him to shoot back across the track into Sainz's path. So we'll just play it on, there you go, and then it's that movement that sends him back into Sainz's path there. So let's have a look at the rules of racing document that we always do to figure out what the deal is with this. So here we are, the rules of racing document. We'll go straight down to inside overtakes, overtaking up the inside, which we have covered, and we always look at this this document, and the link for it's always in the description. But as you can see, these are the examples that we look at when it comes to overtaking up the inside. If the attacker is more than halfway alongside at the apex, then any collision is the fault of the defender. If the attacker is less than halfway alongside at the apex, any collision is the fault of the attacker. And if the attacker is approximately halfway alongside, then both the drivers share the blame. Now, one important point to note, obviously, also that we've covered in previous episodes with dive bombing, the attacker should not have achieved the position that we're seeing here by carrying too much speed into the corner. That's called dive bombing, and if it happens, essentially, if a crash happens when you're dive bombing someone, it's just entirely your fault. So this is really, aspect C is more what we saw from that incident. Verstappen was at least halfway alongside as we got to the apex. I would say that he wasn't really carrying too much speed into it either, and really I think this is going to fall more into a racing incident than putting blame to anyone else. So let's look at it again. You know, like I said, this turns into an inside overtake, and Verstappen goes up the inside, and you know, he's not overly. When you look at the speed differential between Verstappen and Sainz, it's not as if Verstappen is just launching himself past Sainz. You know, they're slowing down at relatively similar ways, similar speed. It's just that Verstappen's slightly later on the brakes, but really they're pretty close. And even at this point, before we've gotten to the apex, Verstappen is, you know, halfway alongside. You can see it right there. And then as we get even closer to the apex, he's definitely, I would say at this point he's even more than halfway alongside. It's almost front wheel to front wheel. So it's not as if it was like case B that we saw from the rules of racing document, where Verstappen is less than halfway alongside and then it becomes automatically his fault for not backing out of the crash. At this point, I would say that it was, if anything, more Sainz not giving enough space to someone who had claimed a bit of space on the inside. And really, it's that lack of giving the space that forces Verstappen over to the inside into the curb, and that sends him back over and crashing. Where else is he meant to go at this point? As the door is closing further and further from Verstappen, he's got nowhere else to go. He can't brake any more than what he's doing. He goes over the curb, and that's what causes the accident. And like I said, if this was touring cars or closed wheel racing, that wouldn't really be an issue. It would be a totally fine overtake. But because an incident happened because of the open wheel nature of these cars, that's why we're looking at it. But for me, he's not going into the corner at an overly over speed. He's not dive bombing at all at this point. He's still braking at almost the same level that Sainz is. And for me, it's just not a very smart move from Sainz to be trying to push this too much. I mean, he's in a McLaren. He probably would have gotten overtaken again anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, not making the smartest decision doesn't mean you're always in the wrong for an incident, but there's no need to be squeezing this much when this isn't really your race. He was in 6th place. He could have been aiming to get 6th place at the end of the race. This isn't really his fight, but he just, for me, squeezes too much and sends Verstappen into the curb, and that's what sends him back into Sainz. So for me, if nothing else, it's a racing incident. I certainly don't put any blame on Verstappen. He went for an overtake up the inside, and I think it's a fair enough move to make, looking at it like this. And if anything, I would probably be putting more blame on Sainz for closing the door too much and causing this incident to be, if he just left a little bit more space, which really he was obliged to do based on the rules of racing that we've seen. Verstappen was far enough up the inside that more space should have been given. Really, I don't think this would have occurred if Sainz had just left a bit more space. But obviously he didn't. Goes onto the curb, goes back into the crash, and I think, for me, I would probably just be putting this down to a racing incident. It's just one of those things. If anything, I would be putting the blame more on Carlos Sainz for this than I would Max Verstappen. But for the most part, I would just be saying, this is what a racing incident, one of those things. Even if no damage had occurred at all, no one would even really have talked about it. It was just because Sainz got the damage afterwards. But frankly, I think that was his own making for really not leaving the space that he should have left. And we've seen it from the Rules of Racing document. I think Verstappen was enough up the inside there to warrant some more space. But obviously, as always, you guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and the poll, which will pop up over there if you're on a phone or a tablet or the PC. The card will pop up there. It'll have a poll there that you can vote on. Was it Verstappen's fault? Was it Sainz's fault? Or was it just a racing incident? I would probably put this down to a racing incident, just one of those things. Nobody should really be punished for something like this. It was just, hard racing. Okay, so second clip, we've actually got it from the other perspective as well, but I wanted to show this perspective first of all. Basically, it's just a little bit of a hit. It's just a small nudge and allows the position to be gained there. So we'll see it from the perspective of the car in front. And coming along here, it just gets a little bit out of shape, really, at that point. The Honda manages to get up the inside, but really not enough. Has a little bit of a tap on the back end, and is able to get through because he's unsettled the car in front. So let's slow it down. And for me, this is exactly what we've just been talking about. We've just seen what you need to do. You need to be more than halfway alongside at the apex without taking too much speed into the corner to be warranting of some space. And for me, this was just never on, because to get to the position that the Honda has done, he's off the track, he's on the grass. This really wasn't a place where he was going to get through. The racing line obviously comes across here, so it's not as if the Audi is doing anything out of the ordinary here. Yeah, he got a bit, he was a bit slow and he got a bit out of shape, but that doesn't mean you can just steam in and knock someone out of the way. So for me, the fact that the Honda is off on the grass there, and then, it's just a little bit of a tap, but the tap comes from, front wheel to rear wheel, as you can see there. If the tap was side by side, then okay, it's just one of those things. It's just a good overtake. But the fact that the hit comes from rear wheel to front wheel, that's telling, that's almost a slam dunk that it's the Honda's fault, because at the point of contact, he wasn't more than halfway alongside the car that he's having contact with. So it's just a little bit of a hit, but it's enough to unsettle the Audi in front, and that allows the Honda to gain a position from that. And for me, if I was a steward in a race like this, I would be saying that's the Honda's duty to give that position back, because he got that position illegitimately for me. It seems clear cut in my mind that, certainly if I was the Audi, I would feel very aggrieved at losing a position because of that, especially when you take into account that the Honda was off on the grass to be even able to make that that move in the first place. So I think at this point the Honda should have just realized it wasn't really on, backed out of it, because the grass is there. I mean, to be fair, he is braking. As soon as he realizes he's on the grass, he does start to brake. You can see the brake lights come on, brakes a little bit, and then brakes a lot. And even up to the point of contact, he's still braking. So I would be hard pressed to say that this was even necessarily intentional. He just went for a move, didn't realize that the grass was going to come up as quickly as it did. But I wouldn't also then say that it wasn't his fault for taking, he still took advantage of the situation, even if it wasn't, even if it wasn't intentional. It was still his fault that contact occurred, and that he was able to gain a position from that contact. So I would be putting this down to the Honda. I would say that the Honda is at fault for this one, and that in this kind of situation in a race, he should be giving that position back and try to get the overtake done in a more, legitimate way. But obviously, you guys let me know your thoughts. The poll in the top right will pop up. You can vote on who you thought was at fault. Was it the Honda? Was the Audi at fault for maybe playing devil's advocate? He blocked him off too much. But I don't think necessarily the Audi did anything out of the ordinary in this situation. And yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts, obviously, in the comments as well. Or was it just a racing incident and you wouldn't penalise anyone for this? And it's just one of those things that you see in this kind of racing. Let me know your thoughts, obviously, in the comments and on the poll in the top right. So, next clip on GTA in Feltz's. This is a blast from the past clip, this one. And there's a bit of a coming together there, and the person who we're racing with just gets through the both of them. So we're going to slow this down. So we've got... Let me go back a little bit further. We've got the light blue Feltzer goes for an overtake up the inside of the dark blue Feltzer, which is all fine. Gets into the lead of the race. Then the dark blue Feltzer carries more speed around the outside of the corner, taking a wider line, obviously aiming to then go up the inside for the next corner, which is a left-hander. Which is what he does, but it's a bit harsh, to be honest. You can see that point of contact. Again, I would say that this contact here is the fault of the dark blue car, because he's not really on the line for the corner. The line for this corner goes along there like that. The light blue car is more on it than what, the dark blue car is still traveling in this direction. So for me, this contact here is the fault of that dark blue car for basically just being a bit out of shape and trying to hold a position that wasn't really going to work. So bit of contact there. Obviously, it's quite telling that the light blue car has such a reaction to that contact that he flies completely off. And then the car that we're racing with, purple Feltzer, tries to take advantage. And I would say at this point it looks like it's all going to go great, but then there's a little bit of a hit with the dark blue car, and you can see on the map in the bottom left here that is the dark blue car, and he basically gets badly affected by that hit he went through. You know, he loses a lot of speed from that and pretty much crashes him out. So it's a little bit of a difficult one, because this one, it comes from a previous incident, and you know, it was kind of like what we were saying in the previous episode of how much to blame are you for someone else's incident, and what should you be doing to avoid it, especially at the kind of speed that this is going. I don't think I can put any blame on the purple car here who we're riding with for just taking his normal racing line, and certainly at the speed that this is as well, when you play it at full speed. And I guess really it's this final little reaction from that crash. I don't know how you can really avoid that as the purple car. You know, what can you really do? You can't anticipate that something like that's going to happen, especially at the speed that it does. You're just taking your normal line, you're going for an undercut, and at this point it looks like it's all going to be okay, but the dark blue Feltzer makes a slight jink to the left, which sends him more into the path of the purple car. As we see here, it's okay there, and then there's another jink to the left there, again probably a reaction from the crash, and that's what causes the crash. So for me it was all on the dark blue car that this crash even occurred. I don't think that I can put any blame on the purple car for this, because you know, he didn't necessarily do anything out of the ordinary, and if the dark blue car hadn't have made the first crash happen in the first place, he wouldn't have been in this situation. If he hadn't have jinked more to the left like that, he wouldn't have been in this situation either. I just think it's not on the purple car to, you know, be, especially at the full speed, when you look at it at full speed, to be trying to avoid something that is pretty much impossible to avoid when you're going at those kind of speeds in a racing situation. And like I said, it's the dark blue car that really was the cause of all of that. So if anything bad happens, then he was the cause of it. He was the one that started it. He was the one that went for an overtake that wasn't really on. And then what happened after that, that was a consequence of his movement in the first place. So for me, I would probably be putting this down to a racing incident. I wouldn't necessarily say that the actual contact that we're looking at was entirely the fault of the dark blue car, because he was involved in a crash. He didn't really have any control over what's going on. I would have to say that if you're wanting to pick sides, yes, the dark blue car is more at fault than the purple car is, but for me, it's enough that it's a racing incident. It's not really anyone's fault that this crash occurred, mainly because it was just one of those things that happens. Yes, more blame would land on the dark blue car, but yeah, for me, I would just put this down to a racing incident, let them go off on their merry way, and live to fight another day. That's just how it is. I certainly wouldn't be giving a penalty to the purple car for this one. But obviously, you guys let me know what you think. Was it the purple car's fault for not realizing what was happening? Was it more the dark blue car's fault, and you don't think it was a racing incident? You would actually put the proper blame on the dark blue car, or was it the light blue car's fault? I'll even put that in the poll in the top right, so you can vote on that if you want, even though he didn't really do anything at this point. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. I guess you could say maybe to a certain extent the light blue car could have left more space on the inside, but I don't think really that's just me playing devil's advocate at this point. The closing speed and the closing angles there, I don't think really you can put any kind of blame on the light blue car for that one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the poll and down below in the comments as well. And yeah, an interesting one to look at. I'll be interested to see what you guys think about this one. Alright, final clip. Coming up to the final part of a playlist race on GTA. It's the final few corners. We got one hairpin to go after this, down at the end here. And it's again an inside overtake that we've been looking at. It was fairly rough, but let's try and pick it apart and see if we can determine any fault, or whether it was just, you know, one of those things and a decent overtake. So we'll slow it down. We can see that obviously the Tyrus is is making quite a defensive stance. He's not all the way over to the left, which is what you would expect for the racing line. The racing line, is really over here, and then you're going to come around and then go back out wide. So, by going to the inside here, he's trying to defend his position, but the track is so wide that it's very difficult really to defend a position somewhere like this. You're just trying to make it a little bit harder for someone behind to get an overtake done. So he's coming into the corner, obviously braking for the corner, and then we get, basically, it's really just like 2 dive bombs in one. And obviously it's the final corner of the race over first place, so you can't blame anyone for going for a move like this. They just kind of come out of nowhere. And I think if there was only 2 cars involved in that incident, whether it was the Wagner and the T20, or the T20 and the Tyrrus, or even just the Wagner and the Tyrrus, I think it would have been just a normal decent overtake. But it's because there's 3 cars all going for the same piece of track that it feels so rough and ready. When you look at it, what probably happens here is that the T20 goes for the overtake, obviously, on the Tyrrus into the final corner. And then the Wagner's obviously going for the overtake on both of them. You can't really see any contact here, but they're probably, with GTA lag and all that kind of stuff, you would probably put some level of... there might be some contact going on between the Wagner and the T20, such that the Wagner is hitting into there, the T20 hits into the Tyrrus. That's probably the sort of thing that's happening, but it's difficult to really apportion too much blame. Now, having said that, when you look at the line that the Wagner takes, he does carry way too much speed into the corner, because, look at where he is. They're already around the corner, and the Wagner is still facing this way. He should be basically there if the corner was being taken correctly. The T20 also, but not quite as much. And it goes very, very wide. So you could argue that this was a dive bomb, because he's not really going to be making that corner in any normal fashion without hitting someone. And the same could be said for the T20. The T20 goes for the overtake up the inside, but without this hit on the Tyrrus, which you see there, is he really going to be able to make this corner? Is it just the hit on the Tyrrus that allows him to slow down enough to be able to turn tighter? I would say probably yes. Whereas when you look at the way that the Tyrrus is going into the corner, he's totally going to get to the apex. As the way that he's braking for it, he's fine on the apex, turning in already. And then, in fact, let me try and just put it to the point of where these guys appear. So if you see there, you look at the angle, the Tyrrus is pretty much angling into the corner. Again, the racing line is out here. This is the apex. That's where you want to be hitting. But you've still got the T20 going straight, and you've got the Wagner going even straighter. So, for me, it's difficult, because there isn't really any... there's not a major crash that happens because of this, and the fact that there's multiple cars involved muddies the waters a little bit. But I would say that both the T20 and the Wagner carried too much speed into that corner, and it became a dive bomb. We've just covered it. You're not meant to get to a position where you're up the inside of someone by carrying too much speed into the corner, and that's what's called a dive bomb. And if a dive bomb happens and there's contact, then ultimately it is just your fault for causing that contact. And it looks like the T20 kind of realised it was his fault, because it seems like he backed out of it. You can see it on the map just there, and gave the position back to the Tyrrus. But obviously, scumbag in the Wagner didn't decide to do that. For me, I would say that both of those guys should have been giving the win back to the Tyrrus. I don't think that they would have made that corner without the Tyrrus being there. And in fact, the Wagner pretty much doesn't make the corner in the first place. So they took too much speed into that, got to a advantageous position by taking too much speed in, and any contact that happens because of that is entirely on their fault because they took too much speed. There's nothing wrong with trying it and going for it, but for me, I would put the fault. I mean, we're going to have to choose someone, but since the T20 did seem to back out of it and give the position back, he already admitted fault for that, I think. So I think I need to put the blame on the Wagner for that one. He should have given that position back. He went for an overtake that wasn't really on and carried way too much speed into the corner. So if I was voting on the poll, which will appear again in the top right, I would be voting for the Wagner on that one. But you may think differently. You may think it's just a racing incident. You may think it's all fine. Nobody was at fault. Maybe you think the Tyrrell was at fault for not giving enough space. Maybe, I don't know. They just kind of came out of nowhere. So I don't know what you could really do as the Tyrrell for that. But yeah, Tyrrell in blue, T20 in black, Wagner in grey. Those will be your options on the poll. Which one was more at fault for this? Or was it just a racing incident and nobody really was at fault? Or they were all equally at fault? Let me know in the poll and obviously in the comments down below as well, for this one and for all the clips today. You can find in the video description all the info and links that you may need to submit your own clips, and if you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon by becoming a YouTube member or simply subscribing and liking the video. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.